Welcome, FJA students, to another installation of our math notebooks. We're going to be taking notes today on plotting fractions and decimals on a number line. You'll need your notebook. I do recommend a few colors of pens or markers or something to keep your work straight, a pencil, you are going to need scissors, you are going to need glue. However, we don't have any handouts today with this activity. So open your notebook up, go past the last page, maybe it's add and subtract rationals, so you're going to get yourself to a new page, and at the top, please write fractions and decimals on a number line. And during this video, I'll just have you guys pause the video so that you can take these notes. Next, write many fractions and decimals fall between the whole numbers on a number line. Pause and write. And here we have our example. So 1 is less than 1.2, which is less than 1 3/4, which is less than 2. So underneath this, draw out a number line, and I like to draw it with all the numbers so we can start to really conceptualize. So make sure it's not just a number line between 1 and 2, but include your integers like -2, -1. And I just plotted 1 here with blue. So to keep our pattern straight, I'm going to box in 1.2 in green. And so 1.2, if we think of 1 and 2, the area between that, well, this is 2/10. So if we think of 1 and 2 as being divided up into 10, so we can kind of just guesstimate that, I'm going to kind of put 1.2 maybe right about there in green. And purple, let's do 1 3/4. Well, you could convert this into a decimal. In fact, if you want to do that, I have written the math down there, so please copy that down in your notes if you need more notes on how to convert fractions to decimals. I find that if you convert your fraction to decimal, it can be a little easier to plot it on the number line. However, we can also kind of think of, okay, 1 3/4. That means the number 1 plus 3/4 of a whole. And so if we divide the space between 1 and 2 in our minds into quarters, we got kind of 1/4 there, the half mark, 3/4, and then the whole. So I'm going to put our purple dot right there. And last but not least, and this should be easy, and red is 2. So whole numbers are really easy when your number line is divided into whole numbers. Pause and write this down. Moving on, we're going to practice below plotting fractions on a number line. And what we're going to do actually is what I want you to do is either get a scratch piece of lined paper, or what I'm going to do here is I'm going to flip to the very back of my notebook. And let's get rid of that. Flip to the back of my notebook. I'm going to find a piece of paper that's not necessary, and I'm going to cut it right about here, okay? So long ways, I'm gonna cut it long ways. And I'd like it to be about, maybe not a full half of the sheet of paper, but just under. So let's just cut it up like this. Now we're gonna cut it so that is the exact width of a piece of paper. So I'm gonna cut it right about there. All right, get rid of your scrap. Let's go back to our page where we're taking notes. And what we're going to do is we're going to glue this onto the piece of paper just like this. So go ahead and do that. So the numbers we're going to plot, -1, -0.6, -1/3, 0.35, so this is positive now, 0.4, 3/4, and the number 1. We're going to draw a number line right here, and I am going to draw this number line with tenths using the line. So I'm going to draw it right now. Follow along when I'm done. All right, so I have my number line down, and while I did not number each line here, I numbered enough so that we can start to tell. So we've got 0 here, +0.5, and +1, and of course it goes on, but we're just going to deal with numbers right in this range for now. So as you can probably tell, if this is +0.5 or 5/10, well, this is going to be 1/10 or 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, and so on until you get to 0.9 here, right before 1. And it's going to be the same on the other side of the number line. And so what I want you to notice is as the number gets larger or more negative, it gets further away from 0. So -1 is further from 0. It's more negative than -0.5, just like it's also more negative than -0.6 and -1/3. And so pause the video here really quickly and see if you can, maybe you need to convert some of these fractions to decimals, but see if you can guess where we're going to plot all of these, and we'll do it all together here in 1 second. All right, so in red, I'm going to box our -1. Well, -1's pretty easy because it says it right there. I'm going to get another color out now, and -0.6. Well, I know that -0.6 is less negative than -1. It's a smaller number, so it's going to be closer to 0. So let's get some context clues. If I count backwards, I have 0, -0.1, -0.2, -0.3, -0.4. Oh, and it does say -0.5 here, so I know I'm on the right track. And then -0.6. So we plot that right there. In blue, and this one's a little bit harder, is -1/3. So maybe before you resort to converting this to a fraction, try to think, okay, -1/3. Well, if I were to divide the space in between 0 and -1 into thirds, I've got maybe one line right there and one line right there. And if you were to do the math of 1 divided by 3, keeping that negative sign in front of your answer, you'll know that the decimal is going to be -0.333, repeating indefinitely. And so just an estimate, it's going to be -0.1, -0.2, -0.3, and because it's -0.333 repeating, it's going to be slightly more negative than just 0.3. So let's plot it right there. I'm going to get out another color here. So we've got our purple 0.35 or 35 hundredths. This is positive now. So the first place value we can look at is after the decimal. We are in the tenths place. So we know that we're going to go to 3/10 positive. Well, this is divided into tenths now. So we've got 1/10, 2/10, 3/10. And then there's 5 hundredths, which means it's going to be just about halfway to 0.4. So 0.35 is just about halfway to 0.4. So we'll plot that number right there. Back to red, we'll do 0.4. This should be another easy one. It's just a little bit further. So we've got 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, or 4/10 right there. I'm going to get green out again for 3/4. So 3/4, just like we converted up here, has a decimal of 0.75. So again, just like this 0.35, let's first find 0.7. So 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, and because it's 0.7 or 7/10 plus another 5 hundredths behind it, we're about halfway to 8. So we're going to plot that number right there, and then very easy, plot 1 in blue after that. So we finished up with our number line on this page. Flip the page, and we're going to do another number line exercise. Right at the top, number lines aren't always horizontal and don't always have tenths divisions. In fact, rarely will you find a number line with those divisions. So just like I have on my paper, let's make a vertical number line. I put 0 through 3 and 0 to -3, negative numbers on the bottom. And then I put 4 lines in between each. But you all, of course, could put 2 lines in between each or 3 lines in between each. But 4 lines is recommended. Then write practice, plot 2.5, 1 3/4, 0.2, then -2.16, -2.34, and -1.5. Pause here and rejoin when you have finished that. So let's get out our colors again. Let's talk through each one of these. So I'm going to kind of start from the top here. And just as a reminder, numbers that are larger are going to be further away from zero. And the same with negative, numbers that are larger, have a larger negative value, are going to be further away from zero and therefore more negative. So let's start at 2.5. 2.5. Well, I know that that is 2 5/10, and that's basically equivalent. Well, that is equivalent to 2 1/2. So that's going to be halfway from 2 to 3. So if I have 1, 2, 3 lines in between, then I'm going to put that dot here and then square off my 2.5. So that's purple, 2.5. So pause really quickly here and just take a guess. If I'm going to plot 1 3/4, 1 3/4, or 1 3/4 as a fraction, where is that going to fall? Well, I know that 1 3/4 is in between 1 and 2, so it's less than 2, but it's greater than 1. And I actually conveniently have here fourths divided. So I have 1 here, and then 1 1/4, 1 1/2, and 1 3/4. So that number is going to be plotted right there. Lastly, in another color, so for our positive numbers, I'll do blue for 0.2. See if you can guess where that's going to go. Well, it's not going to go clearly on the line, but 0.2 is less than 1, so that's 0.2. It is greater than 0. It is positive, so it's definitely going to be greater than 0. And so if this was divided into tenths, because this is 0.2 is 2/10, let's think about that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If this is 5/10, that's 2.5. I'm going to plot it right about there. That's 0.2. All right. So we're going to start on our negative numbers here. And actually, let's start from this one, negative 1 1/2. 1 1/2. Well, that's going to be negative 1. And negative 1 1/2, if you just think about it without a negative for a second, that's 1 1/2. And so if it was positive, we know it would be between 1 and 2. And since it's negative, it's going to be between negative 1 and 2. Negative 1 1/2 is 1 whole plus another half. So it's a greater value than negative 1, meaning it's going to be further away from 0. So negative 1/2 is going to be right halfway in between negative 1 and 2. Let's get out another color here. Maybe I'll go back to purple here. So purple for negative 2.34. 2.34. All right, first question we ask is, hey, is negative 2.34 larger than 2 or smaller than 2? So it's larger than negative 2. It's more negative than negative 2 because it's literally negative 2 and 3/10 and 4/100, or 34/100. So it's going to be further away from 0. So let's think about it. If this is negative 2, and then right here is halfway, so that's negative 2.5, then it's just going to be just under negative 2.5. 2.5, 2.4, let's plot it, just estimate it right around there. So that's negative 2.34. And last number here, I'm going to do it in red again, is negative 2.16, or negative 2 and 16/100. Negative 2 and 16/100. Well, okay, so it's definitely more than negative 2. Negative 2 would just be negative 2.00. So it's a greater absolute value, therefore it's further away from 0. But it's not as great as negative 2.34. 2 and 34/100 is greater than 2 and 16/100. So I'm going to plot that right about here, just above where I think negative 2.1/100 would be, since it's 2.1/10 plus another 6/100. So it's right there. Thanks for tuning in. Feel free to plot some others here and check yourself if you can using the internet. And I hope this is helpful when we're going through our lessons this week.